the submarine.
What, Hen? What's what?
So she needs new spark plugs.
Check how far that village is. Can you see it, son? Can you see the village?
Yes. Yes, I see it.
And what about our tanks? Can you see any of our tanks down there? Edwards?
Yeah. But they're not ours anymore.
Sounds like whatever Bess needs is down in that village.
All right. Let's go, Edward. Let's go.
Good luck.
Come over here. That tank is going nowhere and he'll be dead by morning. We're fucked.
What's it here? You're just gonna abandon the mission, are you?
Don't you get it? Finch, Pritchard, all of us. We've been fucked all along.
Look, if that's what you want, McManus, then just go.
Don't you ever talk to me like that. I've ran more fucking missions than you have had hot dinner, son.
McManus, just fucking go.
Hello, Warfighters. War is hell. Welcome to the next episode in the series where I am playing through the Battlefield 1 campaign. But rather than doing the traditional type of commentary, which you can see anybody else do, which is like, yeah, I killed him, look at that. I wanted to do something, in my opinion, which is more fun, and talk about the history of World War I. So that way you guys have a better context of what's going on during the game. It might help you connect with things a little bit more. Plus, it's just cool to learn and talk about military history. But you did see, though, at the opening cinematic that this is going to be a mission that's going to be taking place on foot. I have to find things for my tank, and so since I'm not going to be in Black Bess, I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about something else, since armored warfare and tanks just don't mesh with what's going on right now. So this is going to seem a little bit different, and I'm kind of nervous talking about it because this is the first time I've ever done a video like this where I'm talking about my own opinions and conclusions about history. And I do a lot of research in preparation for these videos. I mean, yes, I love to study World War I. I've read numbers of books, and I've watched documentaries about World War I, but I'm obviously not a hardcore World War I historian. There's a lot of things I have to learn because, one, I want to tell you guys interesting stuff. Two, I want to make sure that the stuff I think I know is right. And I also want to learn new things. I mean, those three things really motivate me to do a lot of research in preparation for this. Now, as I do research, I get to formulate my own opinions on things. And so what I wanted to talk about in this video is how the way that the world was prior to World War I is eerily and dangerously similar to the world that we live in right now. We're going to talk about a lot of things, of course, in this here. You know, what the world was like prior to World War I. Of course, what the world is like now and where we can find those similarities and how we can prevent us seeing the same type of stuff, you know, seeing another world war come from the way that the world is right now. Because there's a very common saying, you know, which is those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. That's a pretty well-known saying. It actually is derived from the original form, which is those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, but same principle. And so this is why learning this type of stuff is important. We don't want to fall into the same trap because millions and millions of people died because of this war. And it's honestly really stupid on how it got started and everything, but, you know, we're kind of in the same boat again today. All right, so anyway, we're going to talk about everything pre-World War I first, because that's going to be the more difficult part to be able to discuss and to take a look at. All you'd have to do is really turn on your TV for 10-15 minutes, and you're going to get an idea of who likes who across the world and kind of where we're at right now if, you know, you kind of just dropped out of nowhere and suddenly got interested. But anyway, when you're talking about things that led up to World War I or some of the causes, I mean, you can go back for a long time because World War I is very complex, and it's the culmination of a lot of different issues that were taking place in World War I. It was almost the tantrum to solve, an attempt to try and solve all the problems, which It's one of the reasons why it was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Ha! Joke's on them. But we're going to talk about Germany first, because Germany is obviously one of the largest belligerents in World War I, and a lot of the stuff that we see as far as why World War I happened included them. So there's a lot of animosity towards Germany prior to World War I. One of the reasons France was not happy with Germany following the Franco-Prussian War of 1871, where they ended up getting beat and losing some territory. And so France is looking for an opportunity to be able to reclaim what they feel is rightfully theirs. And even when they're planning prior to World War I, their primary objective, recapture their old territory. You know, that was one of the biggest things for them. But a lot of people didn't like Germany necessarily because they were the cultural and economic powerhouse of Europe. You know, if you were anybody at all and you wanted to be like going to some of the best schools in Europe, you were going to Germany. You were studying German. Like, you were just top dog if you were included with Germany at that point in time. Now, that creates, of course, a lot of contention. Other countries want to be like them. And, of course, you also had some competition taking place, too, because you can't forget about the British Empire, the power and influence they had. They, too, were also an economic and cultural powerhouse. But we'll get to them a little bit later on. One of the things that a lot of Germans believed was a idea or a policy called Mitteleuropa. So it's with T's, not B's, in case you want to look this up. There was a book that actually came out, which was a bestseller at the time, which really talked about how Germany should be the nation that rules all of Europe. And this wasn't the same type of idea that Hitler had and the Nazis in World War II. It was a little bit different. I mean, the thought was that there would still be independent nations. However, they were all governed or almost puppets of Germany. You know, the best way to kind of think of it I can think of is almost like a commonwealth of nations, similar to what the British Empire was. You know, Canada was still Canada, but they were allied. I mean, they were under British control and stuff like that, too. Now, obviously, a lot of countries are not liking the idea of, hey, we should all be one Europe, but under me. And so that was another thing that caused some animosity towards Germany at the time. Now, the biggest ally for Germany was Austria-Hungary. Their alliance was formed in 1879 between those two nations. Now, the thing is Austria-Hungary, they weren't on their game. It was a country that was in a lot of disarray. Basically, they felt like that the way to control countries underneath them in their empire was just to buy them out. That's not smart, because if you're spending all of your money on all these other countries, you can't invest in yourself. The country was in terrible shape. Plus, it was so ill-managed that at one point, they had 15 different national anthems. Like, they couldn't even come to an agreement on that. But this was the country that was closely allied to Germany. Now, King George V, who was the king of England at the time, really was trying to mend relations and build relations with a number of countries in Europe. And so he was working with his cousin, Nicholas II, in Russia to build relations there. Also working with France to try and increase this. And so the UK, they were basically creating alliances or building relations with all of these countries that were around Germany. Like, yeah, they were trying to build relationships with them too, but Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany really started feeling threatened because a lot of these countries around him were starting to become more allied with the UK, and this presented an enormous danger for him. If you're surrounded by enemies, I mean, you're really pinned into a corner, and that could really hurt your prosperity. Plus, Germany really needed to increase their military to kind of keep up with some of the things that the UK and stuff like that were doing. And so Germany did respect the UK. I want to make sure that I say this from the outright. I mean, it's not like these two countries hated each other, but I mean, there was competition to take place. And one of the things that Germany really respected about the United Kingdom was their navy. And the UK needed a giant navy to be able to hold their territory and be able to maintain their dominance in Europe and across the world. And Germany felt that they needed the same thing as well. But of course, if one of these countries that you're competing with is trying to match you and exceed you in some of the things that you do best, you're going to get worried in return. And so even though that Germany and the UK really tried to hash out an agreement as far as building warships and growing their military and stuff like that, Germany ended up just continuing to push through and make these warships anyway. Winston Churchill, you guys may have heard of this guy, said that a giant navy was a necessity for the UK, but it was a luxury for Germany. And so that created a lot of hostility. And, unfortunately for Germany, though, their navy, as much as they invested on that, really played little to no factor in World War I and spent a lot of time, their largest warships were made in ports. Now, also in conjunction with this, too, even though all of this was going on, a lot of countries just felt like war was inevitable. There was one sentiment at the time that was found in a book. It was written in 1909 by Norman Angell. It was called Europe's Optical Illusion. Basically what it talked about is that the world was so advanced and the economies of the world were so interconnected that the idea of war was just irrational. Like, nobody would want to go to war because it would damage economies so much unless it was a really quick war. And that was a lot of the mindset that a lot of these nations had going into 1914, is that this was going to be a quick war because they basically had to have it be a quick war if they didn't want their economies just absolutely destroyed. Now, all of these treaties are existing around Germany. You've got France allied with Russia. Russia, just all about the Serbian people, that part of the world. The UK has an alliance with France and with Belgium and a number of other countries in Europe. And so when World War I breaks out, what's interesting is that it wasn't just, hey, this side goes to war against this side. Because of the treaties that took place, it was basically a whole number of wars being fought in one massive war. Okay, so when Franz Ferdinand is killed, the Austro-Hungarian Empire is not happy with Serbia, so they declare war on Serbia. Russia, not happy about that, declares war on Austria-Hungary. Germany is not cool with that, they declare war on Russia. France is not cool with that, they declare war on both Germany and Austria-Hungary. Now, because of the Schieffelin Plan, which maybe I'll talk about it at some point, but it was basically the Germans' strategy to the war to basically come in from the north, go through Belgium, and come around to try and attack Paris from the north. Now, France is trying to go from the south, basically, and so they're kind of like switching spots, if that makes sense. Anyway, because Germany ended up going through Belgium, that throws the UK into the war. And so, yes, Franz Ferdinand, the bullet that killed him was one of the main purposes of the war starting, but there's a lot of these little wars that are basically, well, I shouldn't say little because Germany versus the UK is not a little war at the time, but just these various things kind of lead up to where we're at in World War I. And this is basically just a brief summary. I mean, you can go through and you can talk about so many different things that also occurred. Like Germany really wanting colonies and all of this type of stuff, and they wanted an opportunity to weaken Russia because they were afraid of them and, all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing that you can take a look at is nationalistic pride really growing to the point where nations thought that they were so good at what they did and were able to understand what the other side was doing more than anybody else. They thought that they were superior in that regards. And at the same time, these alliances that existed really thrust countries into war that, they had no stake in some of the original reasons why war started. So, how does that translate to today? The idea of Germany being surrounded by what they see as a lot of hostile nations is something that we see right now. At the end of at the end of the Cold War, there have been reports that say that Russia and the U.S., as well as some other countries within NATO, came to an agreement that since the USSR had been dissolved and Russia existed, that there would be no expansion east for NATO, that it wouldn't add any more countries. However, that wasn't the case. Now, this was an informal agreement, which is what I read and hear about, but it happened nonetheless, and that's one of the reasons why Russia is not a huge fan of the United States as well as other countries in NATO. And the fact that they try to do things in Ukraine to destabilize it and other things like that is really to put up a buffer between Russia and the West. Just as how Russia feels right now, that's how Germany felt. They felt that there was no way for them to get out of that stranglehold unless there was some type of action that was taken. And the idea, too, that war is just irrational at this point, that there will not be a large-scale war again, that's something that we see as well. I mean, you can look it up, and there's articles that basically talk about how there will be no World War III, or there will be no war between, this nation and that nation because of the importance of the economy. And I do think that that does play a factor. I mean, as we've become more of a globalized society, yes, our economies do tie together. However, there will be reasons and causes for nations to be able to go to war. And of course, one of those is the treaties. If we look at the United States, for example, there's a number of treaties that exist with a whole bunch of different nations. If China tries to do anything with Taiwan, the United States has to step in. If North Korea invades South Korea, the United States has to step in. If anything happens in the North Atlantic, the United States is stepping in along with the rest of NATO. And these are not the only countries that have alliances. I mean, if you take a look at Syria, for example, you've got obviously the Syrian government is allied with Russia and is also allied with Iran as well. One thing could happen in there that could bring a number of nations together to fight, against each other as well. A lot of the things that we see, as I mentioned in World War I, is very similar to what we have today. And in fact, there's more too. You can look at how Russia and China are both modernizing their militaries to keep up with the United States, but too much to talk about. These are too short. I'm going to have to end it here. Thanks for watching, you guys. I sure do appreciate it. Make sure you guys subscribe if you have not already. You can follow me on Twitter at _warisHell. But thanks again, you guys, for watching. I appreciate it. War is hell, but you don't have to worry because war fighters, I've got your six.
I lost my way back there.
There's no right way in a place like this.
We'll find one. You're the driver.
Nice work, boys.
Yeah. We did good, didn't we?
Aye.
Right, sir, that's the last of them.
Let's get on moving.
I've done everything right. Everything. My whole sodding life. All I've done is live my life by the manual. By the manual! What's wrong with you? You stupid bloody machine! Come on, Bess. Pull yourself together and work with me here. Fuck's sake, I thought you liked to bloody well.